everyone, how you doing? I'm Kirsty, aka Beth Bookish, and on today's video I'm going to be talking through all of my writing projects. I've been writing since before I could write. Basically, my mum always used to tell me that I was always coming up with these little tales and these little stories, and even before I knew how to properly write, I'd be like scribbling on a bit of paper and she'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'd be saying, "I'm writing a story." So writing has always been there for me. I think stupidly, I decided to not go down any kind of writing or creative writing degree. At the time, between a really crappy school careers service and some of the opinions of my mother, it was dissuaded for me to study anything to do with like English and literature and things like that, because everyone just kept saying, "Oh, you know, pretty much you only do that if you want to be a teacher or a librarian," which I was like, that doesn't bother me. And I was gradually convinced that there weren't many career prospects, and I at the time didn't really know how to find out what career prospects there were. So, you know, I went to the careers advisor, and when she tells me there's not really anything that you can do with those degrees, obviously I listened and I got influenced. So I ended up studying science, which I loved, don't get me wrong, but I've never done anything with. But I did continue doing writing all through uni. I was in the publishing society, I was in the creative writing society, and ended up becoming an editor for the publishing magazine. So I did still do writing, and now as an adult I've done teaching and I'm like, it was okay. But I'm back to, I want to write, I want to do content writing. I'm now running a blog, I'm talking about books, I want to go into publishing. So now I really do regret that I didn't stick with my gut and stick with my heart and just continue doing creative writing. But anyway, I might go back and do a master's at some point in it, I don't yet know. But it wasn't until about 6 years ago that I decided I'm going to take writing a little bit more seriously, and I now feel ready to write a book and stop writing fan fiction, which I still write. But I now also write my own projects. I have 5 major projects that are on the go or that are in the planning stages, and I'm going to go through these based off of how much I've written / planned. But I'm really interested to find out from you guys, after I've gone through each of the projects, what you think is the one that would be the most exciting and the one that you would most want to read. So I'm going to go through them all. These aren't in chronological order, these are just in basically my order, and so like from least to most sort of worked on. And I'm starting off with this notebook here, which is one that I have planned. I've got all the scene cards done. You can see in my planning book I've got all the notes that I took. This one is a YA. Even though the characters are 18, they are just going off to university, and it follows our main character who, as a way to try and supplement her income, she decides to do tarot readings. But she brands herself as being psychic, and instead of doing tarot readings very professionally, she just does them from her home and is basically a fraud and blubbing her way through it and just sort of blagging her way through. Unfortunately, she then gives the wrong person a reading, who then curses her, and she ends up being able to see spirits. And she wakes up the next morning and there is a ghost in the house, and she obviously freaks out. And it turns out that over the course of the last sort of 5-6 years, there have been a few students who have died. Up until now, every single one of them was just labelled as an accident or ill health or depression and suicide. None of them were treated as suspicious until the main character starts being able to see spirits and realises, after speaking to each of these spirits, that there was foul play involved, and each and every one of them was actually a murder. So now she has to try and get somebody to believe her when she says, I can talk to ghosts and the ghosts are saying this, and try to get them to look into the deaths more closely. And there's quite a lot of rep in this book. I had planned, there was some disability rep. One of the characters was autistic. One of the characters was a wheelchair user. There's also LGBT rep. And I was also going to have BIPOC rep in here. The only problem I have with this one is, even though I've planned it out, I'm not sure if it's one that I actually want to write, and I don't know if it's going to be something that people are interested in, and I'm not quite sure. There's a couple of plot things that I'm really not quite sure what I'm going to do with. But yeah, this one I just thought would be sort of like a paranormal murder mystery and YA. Next one I had is one that I came up with only a couple of months ago while I was working as an exam invigilator, which here in the UK, I know in some countries if you're watching students doing their exams, you can sit and like have a notebook or you can read. In the UK, you're not allowed any of that. You are just stood or walking around a room for 45 minutes to 3 hours while the students write their answers in their exam books. And yeah, it lets your mind wander. This one is inspired by Arcane, which is a series on Netflix, and if you haven't seen it yet, please do, it's awesome. I was very inspired by this and I came up with the idea of a steampunk world similar to Piltover. So there's going to be a part that's like really well built, really distinguished, is very affluent, and then there's going to be the area that are basically like the slums where they're just left to do it. They're ruled by their own devices, and there's a lot of gangs and a lot of mafia type behaviour in there. And essentially we're going to have a set of twins. They both were born in the rough area. One of them showed signs of being very intellectual, very, very clever, and like intuitive when it comes to creating things. So she was nabbed very early on and taken to the richer area in order to study and become an engineer. And so she's an inventor, she's a scientist. Meanwhile, her brother originally started working in the mines. Then he was recruited by one of the criminal syndicates and now works for them, takes part in the fighting pits, and has become addicted to a new drug that recently was introduced to the Undercity and has slowly started to corrupt a lot of people. But unfortunately, it also kills a lot of people. And the story basically follows the main character when she realises that this drug, everyone has been led to believe that it's, the Undercity have brewed it themselves, it's their problem, we don't need to get involved. She discovers that the inventions that she's been creating, some of them have been used to manufacture the drug by her superiors, and it's their plan to try and wipe out the vermin. So when she discovers this, she ends up going back into the Undercity and teams up with her twin brother to try and discover what's going on and stop this corruption from happening. It's going to be quite interesting as well, because there'll be obviously a lot of conflict between the siblings, and there's going to be quite an interesting array of characters. But again, with this one, I'm not sure if I will ever get round to writing it. It's just an idea that I've got that every now and again I go back to and do a little bit of planning on. Next up, we have one that I started planning about 6 years ago. I then decided I wasn't going to go ahead with it. And then about a year ago, I went, actually, I want to revisit this, and I'm now looking at it again. This is a YA. I'd say it's more post-apocalyptic than dystopian. And the premise of this one is that angels and demons have always existed. We've always known about them. The demons, however, were always kept at bay. They were imprisoned, and so the world was kind of relatively peaceful, and each region of the world had angels that protected it, overseen by the archangels. And then there came a point where the demons managed to break free. They wiped out all of the angels and all of the seraphim, which were the angelic offspring and kin, who were the ones with the ability to kill them. Ever since this event happened, the demons have basically enslaved humankind. Demons exist by stealing souls. So every few years they have what's called the reaping, where they assess human souls. Those with really strong, healthy, good souls are taken to basically become cattle for them to gradually feed off. Those with weak souls are immediately killed and devoured. Then there are those with souls of the angel kin and the seraphim, and they again are immediately killed because the demons don't want them alive because they have the potential to kill them. Now, our main character discovers that he has one of these souls, but he's able to get away and go into hiding. So it follows his story of being trained up to eventually join the rebels and try to take over, take the world back, destroy the leader of the demons. There's also a discovery that angels might not all be dead. There may still be a few alive. So there's then the discovery of those. There is a romantic relationship in here. He falls for a young man and there is a male-male relationship. There's enemies to lovers in this. And yeah, it's just going to be quite an interesting one because it features like rebellions and taking back power, which are all things that I enjoy. And he's also dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of guilt in himself. And like I said, this is one that I started planning a while ago. I still think about it every now and again, and I remember all of the characters. So I'm like, that's worth going back to and exploring more. Then my final YA is this one. If you are a writer, I recommend this book, The Novel Planning Workbook by Rachel McCollin. It's brilliant. And this is an Alice in Wonderland retelling. And we start this book with 14-year-old Hattie, who is the daughter of Alice and the Hatter, discovering that her mother's mad ramblings about being the Alice from Alice in Wonderland were true. And for reasons I will not divulge, Alice and Hattie have lived in our world, and Hattie has never known anything but our world. She's never met her father, he was left in Wonderland, and Alice has been trapped in our world. Unfortunately, her mental state suffered, and so Hattie has only ever known her mother to be this crazy lady who occasionally goes off on wild tangents about how she is Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and quite often has ended up being placed into mental health units. And so Hattie's always been very sceptic about it and just basically doesn't have a great relationship with her mother until the day her mother is kidnapped in front of Hattie and is transported back to Wonderland, and Hattie has to follow, and suddenly she realises that everything she thought was wrong is actually true. And now she has to try and navigate Wonderland to find her mother, with the added difficulty that there is a new ruler of Wonderland who has placed a curse on the world so that nobody knows who Alice actually is. And nobody remembers what she did for them. So this one's really interesting because obviously she's got to try and find her mother, but also try and break this curse. She needs to try and find her father, which is going to then have the added problem of him not believing who she is because he won't remember Alice. And she has the best character and my favourite character, her cat, Ches, who goes with her. I've had a lot of fun writing this. And then the final project, which is my baby. I've been working on this for 5 years now, and it's currently sat at about 96,000 words. This is my very adult novel for fans of Outlander and Vikings. In this novel, we have Amber, who she's not had the best of lives. A lot of tragedy has happened to her, and it's turned her into someone who pushes people away, who doesn't trust, who doesn't rely on anyone but herself. She's very strong, very independent. She basically does anything she can to make it so that she can never be hurt again. As a result, it's left her also very lonely and very isolated from everyone. One night, she ends up in a car crash that puts her in a coma. And she wakes up in the body of her Viking ancestor Freya. And now she's in a completely different body, a completely different world. She wakes up in Freya's body and immediately has to run for her life because she is being hunted. And she doesn't know why. She suddenly finds herself in this body that doesn't know how to run, that can't breathe when she tries to run, doesn't have any body strength to fight, and also has no memory of her prior life. She remembers everything about being Amber. She has no memory that has come from Freya. So she eventually manages to escape and ends up miles and miles and miles away being rescued by a guy called Habjørn. And over the course of the book, Freya and Habjørn develop this really lovely chemistry and this lovely bond. They do start to fall in love. Unfortunately, Habyan is married to a very horrible woman called Mildredy, so there's conflict there between Freya and Mildredy, and Habyan's kind of just stuck in the middle like, shit, 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 what do I do? The whole premise with this story is as she adapts to living in the Viking world, Amber learns how to be vulnerable again. She learns how to have friends and open herself up, and all of these experiences make her reflect very heavily on who she was back in her world, and realizes that there's a lot she can do back home to improve on things. But the longer she spends in the Viking world, the more she feels reluctant to return. It's that story of like recovery from trauma, but also it blends together my love of history and the Viking period especially. I probably really did way too much research on it. So now there are bits of the book where it starts to read like a history textbook, which I need to rectify. But I'm really happy with how this one's going. I'm really excited about it, and I have plans for the entire trilogy. I know how it's going to end, and I'm just so excited to get on and write it. Those are like the 5 projects that I'm currently working on. I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know in the comments which one you think is the most exciting and the one that you think is going to be the one that people are really going to hype about and really going to love, and which one you're most excited for. Like I said, I do love writing. I don't really write as much as I should do, and quite a lot of time that's because whenever I sit down to write, same with my artwork, whenever I sit down to draw, that's when my head decides to go explodey bang. But I am trying to prioritise my writing a lot more. And yeah, let me know if you would like to see some more writing videos from me, so I can go through projects in more detail. I can talk about like the different software that I use. I could talk about my favourite planning tools and how I plan. I can talk about the groups that I'm in. So I could do like a little writing series. So let me know if you would be interested in that. And as I said, let me know which of these you think is the most exciting and which one you would definitely want to read. In the meantime, I hope you're good. I hope you're staying safe, and until the next video, I will see you later.